Kyoya is your average matrix slave struggling to survive on a 9 to 5. Eventually, he gets fired and decides to move into his parents' basement only to find himself 10 years and past the very next day. With this chance, Kyoya decides to make things right, starting from clapping his crush so he would get married with her in future. However, before any of this, Kyoya is traveling on a bus watching an announcement made by a game company called Succeed Soft. He notices the names of Nana and Shino, who are stars from the Platinum generation. This makes Kyoya think about how he used to love anime and games, resulting in him working in that industry. However, his workplace turned out to be more terrible than he thought. The games they released didn't sell and they ultimately shut down. As expected, Kyoya has become a shower-avoiding Discord moderator with no job, girlfriend, or place to live. Having no other choice, he returns to live with his parents. Kyoya tried everything from directing, video and image editing, and art assistant to logo designing, but nothing worked out. Later, he looks at the pictures of Shino and remembers seeing their name in the new announcement. Kyoya then receives a call from his little sister, who informs him that she found a letter from when he got into art school. This makes him remember how he got into 2 schools but was confused about which one to attend. One was the economics department of the regular university while the other one was art school. He ended up choosing the normal university and thought about how his life would have turned out if he had chosen arts instead. Soon after, his sister arrives and hands over the letter, making him read it and remember the past. In the year 2016, Kyoya was searching for a job when he saw a girl who he thought was going to end her life. He then later apologized for the mistake. She then comments on how her team is looking for a person who can do game-related stuff, and Kyoya volunteers. This resulted in him getting a job at Succeed Soft, and the girl introduced herself as Aiko. At first, he was shoved into a shabby-looking office and ended up doing some work which he did better than Aiko had expected. The work kept on getting better and he was moved to a better desk. Later that day, he went to have drinks with Aiko. She discusses the fact that their company is in a bind as not everyone seems to be interested in celebrating the company's anniversary with a new project. However, she wanted it to be a success and work with Platinum Generation artists. Aiko then notices that Kyoya is a Shino fanboy and tells him that he will become a permanent employee after 6 months. A few days later, Aiko announced that the Platinum project had been frozen due to some problems. Everyone is pissed off and comments on how they were looking forward to it. Meanwhile, Kyoya stands still in disbelief and later was laid off along with his whole team. Back in the present, he regrets his decision but then thinks about how it doesn't matter anymore. After sleeping for a while, Kyoya wakes up to find a younger version of his sister standing in front of him, asking what he wants for his dinner. She further elaborates that he just got into the art university, making Kyoya confused as it happened a decade ago. Kyoya then takes a look around and notices that some of his manga are missing and that he has a PlayStation 2 instead of 3. Finally, he looks at the date that is 2006, making him realize he came back in time and got a second chance. Without a second thought, he chose the art university and walked to the shared house where he would be living. He enters the house but finds it empty, and soon after, his luggage arrives as well. He unpacks some of his stuff and decides to rest. He then drinks some yogurt and thinks about the promise he made to his dad to consume a lot of fermented items. Eventually, he falls asleep and dreams about working on a movie set along with other actors. The next morning, Kyoya wakes up and finds a pretty girl sleeping next to him. The girl wakes up and slowly starts moving towards Kyoya and drinks some of his yogurt. The girl then tries getting up but falls on top of Kyoya instead. The other roommates enter the room and witness the girl buried deep within Kyoya's meat.
Yes! 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 Yes!
Later, they all introduce each other, starting with Nanako, who is from Shiba Prefecture. Next is Tsurayuki, and then Kyoya introduces himself. However, Nanako is curious about yesterday's events and asks him about it. Nanako doesn't believe that it could be a coincidence and throws a pillow at his face. Lastly, Shinoaki introduces herself to everyone and they begin calling her full name, as Shino seems like a manly name. The next morning, Kyoya cooks food while praising his luck for ending up with 2 cute girls. Later, they all are on their way to the university and discuss how Osaka seems more rural than they thought. Finally, they all arrive for the entrance ceremony and notice just how many students are present in the hall. With that being said, they all sit on their dedicated seats and a boy named Takawa sits next to Kyoya and begins conversing with him. The two of them start talking about baseball and Kyoya accidentally tells him something about the future, making Hikawa confused. Just then, their teacher Kano arrives on stage and starts asking students who want to become a director, screenwriters, or animators. Kano then gets all serious and asks Nanako about how many of the 135 graduates landed a job. The correct answer was only 8 of them, which was better than most of the years. She then talks about how entertainment comes after basic needs, which makes its priority pretty low. Choosing such a job makes them idiots, but Kano comments that if they are good at being idiots, they can make money off of it. With that being said, the entrance ceremony ends and Kyoya thinks about it all, deciding that there is no point in getting depressed from the start. He then notices that someone dropped her ID and the person turns out to be Aiko. Afterward, Kyoya thinks about how he might have been in the same room as the Platinum Trio. Soon after, their visual arts classes began and they observed the work of their seniors. He then notices how Aiko is already the center of attention, just as he expected. His next class was regarding the screenplay and Tsurayuki, who was sitting next to him, fell asleep. Kyoya realizes how all of his roommates are relaxed and thinks that everyone needs to be like Aiko. The teacher then writes some writing elements and asks for the remaining ones from Aiko, which she correctly tells, making Kyoya even more impressed. However, for the remaining one, Aiko suggests asking Tsurayuki, who has been sleeping all this time. The teacher has no hope for him, but Tsurayuki surprisingly replies perfectly, making the teacher compliment him. Later, Nanako and the others praise him for correctly answering the question, and then Nanako along with Tsurayuki go to take their next class. This leaves Kyoya and Iki behind, who talk about how hard it has been for them to keep up with class. Kyoya thinks about how his future was supposed to give him an advantage, but his basic knowledge is lacking from the start. Just then, Hikawa arrives and shows his new club uniform to Kyoya, telling him that he joined a ninjutsu club. He then advises the two of them to join some clubs as well, making the two of them check them out. However, they seem to be empty until two seniors spot them and take them to a freshman welcome party. At night, Kyoya asks Iki about her dreams but realizes that she has already fallen asleep and is forced to take her home on his back. She wakes up and apologizes for the trouble. She then comments on how Kyoya overthinks a lot and should talk to her if there is something on his mind. Kyoya then tells him how he feels bad after seeing all the other students being so knowledgeable. This makes Iki reply that there are so many things that he can do that she can't, which makes her jealous as well, and the same goes for Tsurayuki as well. This statement brings tears to his eyes and she starts patting his head. Back at home, Kyoya notices that Iki forgot her bag and goes to her room to give it back, only to see her drawing the famous art from the platinum artist Shino Akishima, making him realize that the Shino he glazed so much back then is Iki Shino. Tsurayuki and Iki are fighting because he accidentally ate her ramen while Kyoya sits there not giving a crap. Nanako suddenly barges in to give her opinion, but later realizes that she is in her. She lands a punch on Kyoya and runs away.
That was easy.
Everyone has already started practicing their work, and it won't be long until they start creating stuff for real. The next day, Kano informs everyone about a group project of 4 people where each person will be handling one area. Additionally, everyone will be seeing the results, and the theme of the project is time. Later that day, Kyoya and Tsurayuki are playing baseball, thinking how it will be hard to convey their message in a 3-minute runtime. Their group consists of all the roommates. Tsurayuki is directing, Iki will handle the technical side, Nanako will perform, and Kyoya will be the producer. Turns out Nanako and Kyoya are doing the same part-time job. Nanako mentions how the manager gave her a bombastic side eye after realizing that they have the same address. Kyoya then asks her the reason for enrolling in this university, and she replies that she was just tired of living in her hometown. Nanako then starts telling him about the lake in her hometown, which was big enough for her to mistake it for ocean. If she had never left her hometown, she might have never found out what the ocean really was. In summary, she came to this university for herself, and listening to her reminds Kyoya of his old days when he was an adult. Nanako then begins helping him out and unknowingly makes Kyoya experience the softness of her plot, which he seems to enjoy a lot. The next day, Kyoya submits his team to Kano, but they still haven't come up with an idea. This makes Kano ask if something interesting happened to him lately, and the only thing he can remember is Nanako's talents. At night, Kyoya tries to wake Iki, who fell asleep while working, and after she wakes up, the two of them enjoy a warm glass of tea together. He then asks her about the reason she enrolls in this university, and Iki answers that she is never good at studying or any other stuff. She also used to miss the train so much that the people at the train station got to know her. Talking about the train station gives him an idea, and he wants the shot to take place at a train station. The train station can work well for depicting the passage of time, as they are always present, and he wants to use that in order to depict the life of a woman. He wants her life to progress in tune with the time of day, and everyone seems to like it except for Tsurayuki, who wants some time alone. Soon after, he returns with a written plot for the setup Kyoya described, which Kyoya seems to love. With that being said, everything is ready, but Tsurayuki asks Kyoya to talk in private. Tsurayuki shows him a notebook with the same idea that Kyoya just told, and he is aware that Kyoya didn't copy it as he had it locked up. However, Kyoya still somehow managed to exactly copy it as if he was reading Tsurayuki's mind, which was a little scary for him. Kyoya then begins to think about where he got that idea from and realizes that it was from a book that he read in the future. This makes him think that he might have unknowingly stolen Tsurayuki's idea. Tsurayuki then asks Kyoya if this is a coincidence or if there is something else going on. Eventually, Tsurayuki rules it out as a coincidence and mentions how many people can think of this idea while learning about screenwriting. This is one of the reasons Tsurayuki wanted to do the bare minimum for this project and focus on his studies. The two of them then decide to make the best project and instantly get to work. After working day and night, which includes working individually and as a group, Kyoya asks Tsurayuki to rewrite the script as they could go over the 3-minute mark. However, Tsurayuki refuses to do so as he already added everything that was the best and nothing could be cut out. Instead, he asks Aki to draw to cramp the storyboard and Nanako to deliver her lines a little quicker. Meanwhile, Kyoya thinks that it might be really worse if they go past the time limit and tells Tsurayuki that they need to follow the rules if they need credit. Eventually, Tsurayuki agrees but asks if this is really his approach to making something good, calling him a lame guy. On their way back, they all talk about how Tsurayuki is such a perfectionist and Aki tries to console Kyoya when Nanako accidentally steps on a boy's face.
Huh?
He then takes their help to return back to his club room where the other members congratulate him for bringing in new students, which might avert the budget cuts. They all then apologize for the commotion and ask Kyoya if he wants to join the club. Kyoya seems hesitant, but Nanako and Aki seem to like the idea, and the club president tells Kyoya about their photography club and gives him some time to make up his mind. The next day, Kyoya is scouting the train station where he runs into Aiko, who tells Kyoya that their group won't be able to outdo hers. She then asks how Kyoya's group will be handling the time limit, but Kyoya doesn't seem to have an answer and she tells him to not underestimate filming. He then pays Kano a visit and she mentions how his group has some creative differences. Kano then shows him the script of a movie that was likely to win a lot of awards, but no one liked the actual movie that came out. The runtime ended up being too long and ruined the tempo. She then informs him how a script can go either way and tells him the importance of production, that if it stops trying, the entire project is doomed. Eventually, he got motivated and managed to bring everyone together and cramp the script in under 3 minutes. Just before they start filming, Aki mentions that the camera that Tsurayuki borrowed isn't a video camera and that borrowing the right one would take too long. This results in Kyoya contemplating if there is nothing they can do, but he brings himself back and promises to figure something out. It is finally time for the screening, and everyone is gathered at the theater hall. Kyoya barely finished editing and none of the group members saw the final product. Soon after, Kano arrives and announces that the screening will be beginning soon. She mentions that something only becomes an artistic project after it gets admiration from the public, which is why there are spectators present in the audience as well. She then asks everyone to be honest and laugh if it is poor, but also praise if what they watch is actually praiseworthy. Aiko tells Kyoya that they will be winning the competition. But that being said, the screening begins and everyone appreciates Aiko's film, and even Kyoya's group members comment on how pretty their film was. After it is their team's turn, making them anxious about how the audience might compare the two. Finally, their short film begins and it mainly consists of photos, reminding Kyoya how on the project day, he decided to figure something out. Tsurayuki argued that they wouldn't be able to make a film using pictures, but Kyoya replied that they could, as he wanted to make their hard work pay off. He remembers how he made a similar movie using Premiere Pro, After Effects, and Photoshop. To start things off, Kyoya asked the photography club president to teach him the art of taking pictures. They then managed to set the camera and told everyone that they would need 100 shots per cut. He tells Nanako to act as if they were filming things and they will pick the best option available among the pictures. Furthermore, they will need to adjust the script a bit, and Tsurayuki reassures them that he will make it work. In the end, Kyoya asks Aki to make a composition that only works with still photography, and she agrees. Afterward, he asked Nanako for the digital camera she brought and took the 15 seconds of video used with her camera. Later, they took still shots in order to put the story together. All of them worked hard to modify the script and make things work out somehow. Surprisingly, Aiko is the first one to clap, followed by Hikawa and the whole audience. In the end, Aiko's team still won first place and they managed to secure the third position. Afterward, Tsurayuki compliments Kyoya, saying that he had no idea what he was trying to do, but the movie came out as amazing as it could be. Furthermore, Nanako also praises him for coming up with such a unique idea. She then comments on how her acting could be better if done the normal way and wants to make a proper movie someday. Lastly, Aki comments on how Kyoya mostly remains quiet, but during the shoot, she was full of butterflies. The three of them decide to not let Kyoya leave them behind, which Kano appreciates and tells how there will be another assignment pretty soon. All three of them are excited to discuss things in order to improve the next assignment they make. On the other hand, Aiko argues with Kano over getting first place instead of Kyoya, and Kano replies that their project was a little unorthodox for an assignment and she has a feeling that they messed up during the shoot. Nonetheless, she is still impressed by Kyoya's problem-solving skills as he came up with such an idea in such a short amount of time. Kano then asks Aiko to work with Kyoya in the second semester, revealing that she is most likely interested in him, making the redhead blush. Turns out Kano is Aiko's older sister and she thinks how her little sister is getting more and more cuter as she grows.
Okay.
Meanwhile, Nanako and Kyoya just finished their part-time job and she asks if he has some free time. She ends up taking him to a karaoke and comments on how much she loves it. Nanako starts singing and listening to her voice shocks Kyoya as he could not believe how good she was. After her turn, Nanako apologizes for singing like a Chinese copy of Justin Bieber, but Kyoya is still in shock after the performance. Nanako then asks Kyoya to come to the karaoke with her often and help her improve her singing. He instantly agrees, and on their way back, Kyoya advises Nanako to upload her songs on the internet. He offers to shoot a video for her, but Nanako gets embarrassed and refuses to do so. Kyoya then suggests uploading on only Japanese websites and Nanako agrees. Afterward, the three of them go to the photography club to celebrate their enrollment, and the president introduces himself as Kuryu and thanks Kyoya as their club survives because of them. Up next, the girl introduces herself as Hiyama and she is responsible for making sculptures. Afterward, the fatty starts singing and then introduces himself as Sugimoto. Lastly, Masaru introduces himself by showing off his dancing skills until he gets dizzy and throws up. On their way home, Aki suddenly stops and asks Kyoya if he knows that she can draw. She then regrets not locking the door and tells Kyoya how she can't do most of the things like they can. However, there is still one thing that she likes, which is making art. She drew some art and won some awards but couldn't get to the point where she could make a living. This is the reason she decided to learn visual arts but didn't have the guts to try the fine arts program. She was hoping that her eyes might light up like Kyoya's, but it never happened. Eika then wonders if she should give up, but Kyoya forces her not to, saying that he really loves her art. This makes her give Kyoya a hug and decide that he will be her goal. Aki will study a lot and become someone who can create the kind of art he wants to see. She then asks Kyoya for his goals, but he refuses to tell her now but promises to do it sometime in the future. For their second assignment, everything was going great from script writing to location hunting until Tsurayuki and Aiko started arguing about their ideas. Meanwhile, Kyoya wakes up Aki, who had fallen asleep, and asks Nanako if she is ready. However, he can't bring himself to look at her as his eyes might lock on the wrong target. On the other hand, Tsurayuki tells Kyoya that Aiko wants to make more cuts in his script during the edit, and Aiko argues that someone can make judgment calls in the editing process. The two of them keep on arguing while Hikawa and the others spectate. Aiko starts walking away and Tsurayuki accidentally pulls her strap, allowing Kyoya to enjoy Aiko's plot.
Yeah, boy.
On their way home, everyone is asleep and Aiko comments on their equipment for the shoot, saying how first-year students aren't allowed to requisition equipment for multiple days. However, their shoot was for 2 days, which makes Aiko curious about what Kyoya could have done. Turns out the third years are allowed to borrow items for a week, and he volunteered to help them in exchange for access to their gear, roping in Aiko with him as well. Aiko comments on how it is against the rules when suddenly a little girl arrives who hears everything. However, she claims to be their senior and tells Kyoya that he owes her if he wants her to stay quiet. She then introduces herself as Keiko and walks away. Eventually, their film is screened, and everyone seems to like it except for Aiko, who comments on how the movie felt scripted. Kyoya replies that she might be overthinking as people seem to like it. Afterward, it is time for the last film, and it starts off with a girl crying, making Kyoya realize that the acting in that movie is leagues apart from theirs. He then notices Nanako, who looks just as shocked as he was. People start to compare the two movies, making Nanako even more anxious. Surprisingly, Kyoya's team ends up winning first place, and Nanako argues with Kano that the ranking was not right as the last movie was clearly better. But Kano replies that they need to look at everything, as good acting doesn't automatically add points for the other areas. In the end, Kano comments that the reason the last movie felt so impactful was because they were serious about their work. Later that day, everyone celebrates their win at the karaoke and they all laugh and enjoy their time. Aiko asks Kyoya if Nanako will be okay, as according to her, she seems to be avoiding dealing with something. Kyoya replies that she most likely needs some time to recover. Hikawa then forces Nanako to sing a song and Kyoya encourages her to do it. After the song, the whole room remains silent for a while until they all start praising her, starting with Hikawa. Suddenly, Aiko picks up the mic and confronts Nanako about her not being serious as an actor. She further comments on how her acting didn't have any feeling of intentionality behind it. Nanako tries to refuse, but Aiko keeps on pressuring her about how the proof is in her performance. Furthermore, she asks Nanako the reason she doesn't follow her passion for music instead of trying to act. Just then, Nanako explodes and starts yelling at Aiko, telling her that he would have done something about it if she could. Aiko then asks her the reason she picked art school instead of going to a proper music school. Kyoya tries to butt in and help Nanako out, but Aiko argues that singing in a karaoke doesn't count as practice and she's just pretending to put in some effort. With that being said, Aiko starts flaming the backstreet actor once again, which pisses Nanako and she almost slaps Aiko. Eventually, Nanako ends up leaving and so does Aiko, who apologizes for causing so much trouble. The next day, Kyoya tries talking to Nanako but she ignores him. Later, the three of them discuss how Nanako is refusing to talk and Iki comments on how she wants Nanako to sing as well. Tsurayuki also adds that it is better for her to confront it right now than look back at it later and regret it. With that being said, Tsurayuki leaves and Kyoya meets up with Aiko, who tells Kyoya that she felt bad for everything she said to Nanako. However, Kyoya replies that Nanako needs to hear that and tell Aiko that she doesn't have to worry about it. Aiko then says that Nanako has been practicing singing since the start and has such an expressive voice that can enchant so many people. Kyoya also agrees and decides not to give up on her and to keep pressuring her until she makes up her mind. Back at the club, the two boy members leave to prepare for the upcoming festival concert. Kyoya asks Kuryu about it and he tells Kyoya everything there is to know, adding the fact that their club will be participating as well. Hiyama then forces Kuryu to stop his yapping and informs Kyoya that their club takes a classroom to run an art exhibition. That was the initial plan, but Kuryu ended up submitting a proposal about a maid cafe. They are already past the deadline and now have to recruit enough people to make it work. Later, Kyoya asks them about Keiko, not knowing that she is present right next to him. Apparently, she came to use the favor Kyoya owed her and wanted him to work on the game she was developing. Kyoya is curious about why she picked him and Keiko replies that he is quite famous in the university due to his production skills. In the end, Kyoya refuses to work and Keiko replies that he then still owes her a favor. Later, Kyoya checks out some of the games Keiko previously worked on and notices how good the quality is and how their budget must be high as compared to the things he worked on. This gives him an idea and he goes to talk to Nanako but she refuses to talk. Nonetheless, he refuses to go away and plays a song right, making Nanako realize that she is the singer. Kyoya agrees and tells her that all he did was adjust it a bit. He wanted her to hear it so she could realize how talented she was. Nanako opens the door and begins crying, thanking Kyoya and mentioning how she never liked the way her singing sounded. This is why she started acting instead, but hearing this song makes her understand what Aiko and Kano were saying. Nanako then thinks about how she wants to sing incredible songs that touch people's hearts and asks Kyoya if she is capable of going that far. Kyoya agrees and wants her to try some stuff with him and she instantly agrees. The whole university is busy preparing for the upcoming festival, including Kyoya. Nanako joins him and comments on how the festival is only 3 days away. Kyoya thinks about how Nanako has started practicing for real and has been relearning pitch and vocalization from Sugimoto. Nanako then asks Kyoya if he thinks she can keep up this singing thing and wonders what the result of all this hard work might be. What Nanako means is that she doesn't have a goal in her mind and isn't sure if she should keep on doing this. However, Kyoya encourages her to keep doing it as she has finally found something she can be serious about. Nanako then asks the reason he cares so much about what she does, and he replies that it is because her singing can have a positive effect on anybody. Furthermore, he promises to help her find the goal she is looking for, making Nanako surprised enough to hug him. She thanks Kyoya and tells him how no friend has ever gone this far for her. Following that, she gets all bashful for suddenly hugging him and eventually thanks him again for the motivation. Kyoya then thinks about how his university is filled with people struggling to create something amazing despite their trouble, and he might be sent from 10 years in the future to help these people out. It is finally the day of the festival, and many things stand out, including the art exhibition and the independent film screenings. Ikawa gives Kyoya a play pass in which he is acting as well. Kyoya then enters his club room, where he is greeted by the two baddies of his house in maid costumes. Surprisingly, Keiko is also acting as a maid as there are not enough people. There are a lot of people gathering at the cafe because of the cute girls working as maids. While they are taking orders, Kyoya is busy cooking. Hiyama apologizes for the trouble, but Kyoya tells her that he wants to help in any way possible. Meanwhile, Kuryu is busy capturing some plot shots until Hiyama puts him down. In the end, the maid cafe was a success and they all ended up working the first 2 days without checking the rest of the festival. Tsurayuki returns home and notices all of them tired as hell, making him wonder how hard a maid cafe can be. Nanako mentions how it feels like overtime at work rather than a festival. However, Kyoya reassures her that they will ask their seniors to let them go a little earlier. Kyoya invites Tsurayuki to check out their maid cafe as well, and he starts making fun of Nanako, resulting in him receiving a punch. The next day, Kyoya notices that Aiko also came to the festival as she wanted to watch the film called Banquet of Sadists. Additionally, she was thinking of apologizing to Nanako, but Kyoya mentions that there is no need as Nanako has started taking singing seriously. Kyoya tries inviting her to the maid cafe, but she isn't interested and starts walking away when Kyoya stops her and asks her to listen to Nanako's song someday. Later that day, Kyoya and Iki go to watch Hikawa's play, only to realize that the poor guy is playing a tree like the good old days. After enjoying a bunch of stuff at the festival, the two of them visit the art exhibition, where Iki ends up loving one of the paintings. Apparently, it is drawn by Yamashina, and while thinking about the artist, Kyoya starts feeling dizzy and falls onto the ground. Later, he wakes up and finds himself on Iki's thick thighs. She tells him how glad she was when he complimented her art. The two of them are about to kiss when Kyoya's phone rings and he finds out that the concert's closing act didn't show up. Apparently, they were able to find a famous singer for the closing act, but he couldn't show up due to his shoot of some music program. However, Keiko tells them to just give the spot to someone else as there must be many talented singers. Considering how this is an art school, Kyoya suggests giving Nanako a chance. Sugimoto agrees, saying that she might be a little rough, but her voice has the capacity to resonate with the public's heart. In the end, it is decided, but Nanako is still hesitant to sing in front of everyone so suddenly without any practice. Kyoya tries to calm her down, but she pushes him away, saying how she can see everyone making fun of her after her performance. She then runs away and Kyoya follows her, asking others to buy some time. Meanwhile, Tsurayuki decides to keep the audience distracted until Nanako arrives, revealing that he knows some party tricks. Kyoya catches up to Nanako, who tells him that this might be a big chance for her. However, she is afraid of losing while she is serious about it. Kyoya reassures her that she won't lose because she has practiced a lot. But Nanako disagrees, saying that practice is different from performing in front of a crowd. She is scared of performing as no excuses will work in front of a crowd. As a reply, Kyoya whips out his laptop once again. Meanwhile, Aki and Tsurayuki are busy with party tricks when Nanako finally arrives. This time, she is really confident, and after everyone encourages her, Nanako finally steps on the stage. She pulls herself together and tells the truth about how she is a replacement and wasn't supposed to be singing today. With that being said, Nanako begins singing and slowly starts catching the audience's attention as they start enjoying it. While singing, she remembers how Kyoya showed Nanako that her online video crossed 10,000 views and told her how there were a ton of positive comments. Seeing this shocked her, and Nanako eventually decided to give it a try. Turns out, Aiko is also at the concert and asks Kyoya how he managed to make this happen. Kyoya informs her about how he uploaded her videos on the internet. She slowly learned her weaknesses and improved them in the next video she uploaded. While listening to her song, Kyoya finally realizes that Nanako is the famous singer Nana from the future. Kyoya wakes up in his room and finds Aki on top of him. Apparently, she came to check out the reference material but accidentally fell asleep. She then suddenly closes her eyes and the two of them get closer to kiss each other when Nanako arrives and catches the two of them, telling them to come down for food. During breakfast, Tsurayuki mentions that he has been missing classes due to extra shifts at work. This makes Aki glad as she thought Tsurayuki was sick or something. He reassures them that he will be taking classes the following week, but when that week arrived, he didn't show up for class. One random day, Kyoya notices Aki and Tsurayuki fighting each other. She insists on him resting because he isn't feeling well, considering how he threw up in the bathroom, but Tsurayuki argues that he's perfectly fine. Suddenly, he starts feeling lightheaded and falls onto the ground. They took him to the hospital and found out that he had sleep deprivation and burnout from work. Kyoya insists that he take some rest, but Tsurayuki reassures him that he'd be fine. Kyoya finally notices that Tsurayuki has been on edge about something, but he refuses to tell and mentions that Kyoya won't be able to do anything about it. Turns out Tsurayuki has been fighting with his parents and is forced to pay tuition on his own. Apparently, he comes from a long line of doctors and his family wanted him to become one as well. This is why he's forced to work a lot but is also skipping classes because of it. He thinks about how it is all for nothing if Tsurayuki can't pay tuition and work. Suddenly, Kyoya comes up with a way for Tsurayuki to make money on his own. However, Tsurayuki thinks that Kyoya might be shooting arrows in the dark and has no idea what he is talking about. But Kyoya argues that he has a solid plan and promises that they will figure it out somehow. Back at home, he asks everyone to make a game together. It will be a doujin game that is usually played on PC. He plans to work on it with the rest of the group and sell it at direct market events. Furthermore, he plans to make a novel-type game that uses text and images. Aki will handle the illustrations, Nanako will be responsible for the background music, and Kyoya will be the director. This results in Tsurayuki apologizing for dragging all of them into this mess. Later, he meets up with Keiko and tells her everything that he has on his mind. She realizes that they need to hurry up as the tuition is due by May and comments on how making the game will be tough even if they are talented. She also adds how a big name should be involved in order to sell the game, and Kyoya asks Keiko to help them in this part. Kyoya admits that he might seem like a gold digger right now, but this is the only solution he has. Eventually, she agrees to let him use their name but has a condition that the game needs to sell well. Afterward, he returns home and tells everyone that he plans to make a game related to school stories, which includes the stories that take place in a school. Tsurayuki wants to include some monsters and hot goth girls as well, but Kyoya refuses to do so. Kyoya then mentions that the game will include romance and some scenes that people enjoy watching on an incognito tab. Tsurayuki gets flushed and takes Kyoya to a separate room, admitting that he has no experience in that part. However, Kyoya reassures him that there are writers who write about this stuff without any experience, which comes as a relief to the cherry boy. They return back to the discussion and Iki comments on how she has never played such a game. Luckily, Kyoya has a virtual girlfriend game installed on his laptop and asks the girls to check it out. Soon after, Nanako comes out and starts hitting Kyoya for keeping such things on his laptop. After class, Aiko invites him to lunch, but Kyoya refuses as he has a meeting. Later, Kyoya along with Kuryu visits a guy named Yamashina, and Kyoya requests him to handle the background of their doujin game. After taking him on board, he goes to buy some equipment with Keiko when they notice a loaded girl standing in front of a shop. A few days later, he informs Kano about their work but keeps the game out of it. Turns out she is already aware of it and heard everything from Keiko. She tells Kyoya that Kano used to work with her on games and had some experience. Kano then advises Kyoya to not let the game disturb his studies, giving him permission to go ahead and make the game. At night, Tsurayuki comes to Kyoya and mentions how all the girls in the game are pretty down bad and fall in love instantly. Soon after, Nanako also arrives and comments on how she has no idea how composing on a computer works. Additionally, Aki also complains about now knowing the right art for a game. The next day, Kyoya is taking his sculpture class and notices Aki falling asleep. Nanako also falls asleep while Tsurayuki is on his last battery cell as well. Aiko notices their behavior and later asks Kyoya about it, and he explains everything that they are working on. Surprisingly, she agrees to lend a hand and he asks for help in script and art direction. Before he leaves, Aiko stops Kyoya and makes sure he is not overdoing the work, and he assures her that all is fine. At night, Kyoya and Tsurayuki are working together, and after checking his script, Kyoya asks him to make it a little loose as it seems pretty stiff. The next day, Aki told everyone that she saw a big black car pull up at school, and some guards along with a pretty girl came out of it. Tsurayuki asks Aki if that girl was wearing a white beret, had short hair, and a rich girl kind of vibe. She agrees, which makes Tsurayuki nervous, and he decides to go out but is confronted by a huge dude at the front door. That girl also came along and hugged Tsurayuki instantly. Everyone looks at them in a confused manner until she gets up and introduces herself as Sayuri, Tsurayuki's fiancé. Afterward, everyone is at the table once again along with Sayuri, and no one is complaining except for Tsurayuki as Sayuri brought all the yummy food along. Sayuri then starts trying to hand feed Tsurayuki while Kyoya thinks about how she seems intent on winning Tsurayuki over. This results in Aki trying to feed Kyoya, and Nanako decides to chip in as well, making the atmosphere even more awkward. Following that day, Tsurayuki tells Kyoya that he and Sayuri have been together since their nursery school day. While he was a kid, Tsurayuki used to think of Sayuri as his older sister, but his parents decided to make her his fiancé. Apparently, Tsurayuki only likes Sayuri as a person and nothing more. He also feels bad for everyone as this is disrupting their work and plans on keeping Sayuri away from the house. At night, Tsurayuki shows Kyoya a script that he made from scratch after considering the style of the games. Kyoya gives it a read and compliments Tsurayuki for doing such a great job. This relieves Tsurayuki as he can now finally rest. Now that the script is done, Kyoya wants Yamashina to send the background on time. Just then, Nanako comes crying, asking Kyoya for help as she can't do the composing stuff. He then notices a melody that Nanako came up with but isn't really confident in. However, Kyoya ends up liking the melody and comments on how the missing things can be taken care of by the music software. She suddenly gives him a hug, wanting to recharge a little while Kyoya tries his best to keep the tower from rising. After getting recharged, Nanako thanks him and Kyoya then goes to Aki. She takes a look at Yamashina's art and really likes it. Furthermore, Shino was also able to draw some characters for the game. Aki then pulls up an R-rated scene on her PC and asks Kyoya about what they are doing. She then asks Kyoya to sit on her bed and starts sketching his thighs, touching areas close to the danger zone. The next day, Kyoya gives the additional script and art files to Aiko and tells her how everyone is worn out due to the workload. She then asks Kyoya about the trick he used as Tsurayuki's script and Aki's illustrations are all different from their usual style. He replied that the game needed to sell more and he asked them to go a little commercial. This impresses her as it is pretty hard to convince someone like Tsurayuki to change his style. Aiko further adds that it must be because they trust him and put their faith in him. At night, Kyoya and Aki are hanging out and Kyoya suggests drinking something warm, but she refuses and asks to visit the art supply store instead. After buying some stuff, Aki asks Kyoya if he is okay with spending Christmas Eve with her, but she quickly dismisses the question. Christmas has passed and it is finally the new year. During the shrine visit, Kyoya prays for the success of their game. Tsurayuki then asks Nanako if the opening song is coming well, considering how she missed her plans for Christmas Eve with Kyoya because of it. She punches Tsurayuki to silence him and then suggests eating something out. After working for a few more days, they watch the first part of the game, which is complete, which makes Nanako a little emotional. Apparently, the game goes on sale on April 29th and Kyoya's job is to guide everyone and make sure the game sells well. At night, Tsurayuki is working but Sayuri keeps on bugging him to warm up the bed and how they can make his script a reality. Kyoya catches the two of them and the three of them start discussing this matter while the girls sit right next to Kyoya. During his part-time job, Nanako asks Kyoya about how he was in Aki's room all day, but Kyoya reassures her that he is only taking pictures for reference. She is still suspicious and Kyoya tries to get away and restock the drinks. Just like before, Nanako starts pressing her on Kyoya's back, letting him know that this time she is doing it on purpose. She then walks away, letting Kyoya know that she won't lose. He discusses this matter with Aiko as he can't make up his mind. Aiko realizes how both the girls are after him and suggests Kyoya act oblivious for the time being so his game production isn't affected. Before leaving, she tells him to clear his feelings after the project is finished and he agrees. The same night, Kyoya and Tsurayuki are working together while Sayuri is forced to sit quietly. At one point, she can't take it anymore and jumps onto Tsurayuki, asking him to come to her house. She then asks Kyoya to work later and tells Tsurayuki that his parents really miss him. However, Tsurayuki doesn't believe it and yells at Sayuri, making her leave the room. Kyoya also decides to give Tsurayuki some alone time and Sayuri also stops visiting their house after that day. One day, Sayuri's car pulls up on Kyoya and she takes him to a location she likes. The thing Sayuri is curious about is the relationship between Kyoya and Tsurayuki, as she thinks the two of them act pretty rainbow with each other. She somehow believes him and then comments on how Tsurayuki has a safe future if he returns home, but all his friends seem to be dragging him down a riskier path. Kyoya replies that it is the path that Tsurayuki chose on his own and all he wants to do is support his friend and celebrate his choice. His words make her understand the passion for art that lies in their heart and she asks Kyoya to help Tsurayuki find happiness. Kyoya informs everyone that they are nearing the end of their game and once they get through the last phase, everything will be finished. Later, he notices how the last part of the script and some of the illustrations are left, making him remember how one of his games failed in the future. But he reassures himself that he won't be failing this time. Furthermore, he asks Nanako to make her melody similar to another track he found. They won't be able to call it Nanako Special, but they might be able to finish in time. Additionally, he asks Aki to copy some of the ideas he gives her instead of following her own direction. Lastly, he asks Tsurayuki the same thing, but he isn't convinced that easily. He argues that there won't be any point in him writing the script if he has to follow directions. However, Kyoya tells him that in these kinds of games, the director handles the plot most of the time. Besides that, they need to finish the game and sell it at the event. Eventually, he agrees to do this as well and follows whatever Kyoya asks him to do. Later that day, he informs Keiko how they will be doing voice recording this week, which surprises her as she didn't expect this much from a bunch of wannabe game designers. Nanako, who is sitting in front of them, is nervous as hell, making Kyoya think that the concert should have been more nerve-wracking. Soon after, they reach the voice recording studio where Nanako does a better job than expected. On their way back, Keiko praises her and comments on how even the voice director was shocked by her talent. The next day, Kyoya brings Aiko to Kuryu, where she starts editing on his computer. Kuryu is curious about Aiko and thinks that she might be an honor student. Suddenly, Kyoya receives a call from Aki and returns home where she excitedly tells him about something she created. Aki showed him some additional illustrations that she came up with, but Kyoya started thinking about the schedule and told her to not change it and refrain from making any other changes. instead of her idea. Kayouya wants her to focus on the character's expressions, and she hesitantly agrees to do so. Kayouya apologizes for not going with her idea, and Iki also apologizes to him for interrupting his work. A few days later, the game is almost complete and all four of them are working tirelessly to debug the game. They need to take the master copy to the printers by 10 a.m. and it is currently 2 a.m., giving them 8 hours to complete it. Aiko also arrives and starts working right away while Nanako informs Kayouya about a bug and he decides to inform Keiko about it. Meanwhile, Aki's version suddenly crashes and Keiko arrives at the same time. She starts fixing the errors that Kayouya informed her about. With that being said, Kayouya asks everyone to ignore the other things and check for bugs, but as they start checking, the number of bugs starts increasing to the point where Aki's computer crashes. Finally, it is morning, and the master copy is complete, but all the other members have already fallen asleep. Eventually, their game was complete and their last job was to sell it at an anime convention. Kayouya is worried about them not doing enough marketing, but Keiko reassures him that if the game cover looks good, it will sell no matter how bad the inside is. Finally, they arrive at their spot and after setting things up, the shutter opens and people start coming in. After the successful distribution, the four of them celebrate by throwing a party. Kayouya thinks about how glad he is to come back to the past and make something with other creators. Later, Kayouya and Iki are out on a stroll, and he thinks about how they will be able to create even more things now. Iki suddenly asks Kayouya if this is how things are supposed to go. Kayouya replies that their game was a success so she doesn't have to worry about it, and Iki agrees. A few days later, Kayouya distributes the money they earned to everyone and Tsurayuki asks Kayouya to talk in private. The two of them walk outside and he tells Kayouya that he will be dropping out of school. Furthermore, he agrees to give his share to the three of them as well. This results in Kayouya getting furious and confronting Tsurayuki about it. Surprisingly, Tsurayuki allows Kayouya to hit him and comments on how he can't do this anymore. He then goes off by saying how he believed that he was talented and could make a living if he tried hard enough. He believed all that until Tsurayuki met Kayouya and realized that Kayouya had a kind of strength that he had no idea about. Whenever Tsurayuki made a blunder, Kayouya was always there to fix things and make them better, which made Tsurayuki believe that he could never catch up to Kayouya no matter how hard he tried. However, as Kayouya wasn't a writer, Tsurayuki decided to work alongside Kayouya, but even in game production, Kayouya handled everyone and guided him where he wasn't able to do a thing. This made Tsurayuki realize that he couldn't achieve anything without Kayouya, which is why he couldn't stay at school. But Kayouya tries to argue that he had faith in Tsurayuki's writing and couldn't have done any of this without him. Tsurayuki then mentions how he wanted his pen name to be from his hometown and also thought to add the way Kayouya's name is pronounced for part of it. Tsurayuki then reveals the pen name, Kawago Kyoichi, reminding Kayouya that he is one of the platinum stars in the future. With that being said, Tsurayuki walks away while Kayouya screams in regret and cries about what he has done. Just then, Keiko arrives and asks Kayouya the reason this happened. This made Kayouya realize that all three of them were stars without his help and didn't need him to guide them or help them out. But after the time leap, he interfered with their life and changed Tsurayuki's future. Keiko smiles and wonders what else might change in the future. Kayouya is having breakfast with Maki when he suddenly realizes that this isn't a dream. When he wakes up this morning, he finds himself in the year 2018. He doesn't remember how he married Iki and how they have a daughter named Maki. Turns out he leaped 10 years back in time. While he is wondering about his situation, Iki then starts shouting at him, saying he has been chewing bread since breakfast started. Maki, with her angry face, tells him that he always shouts at her because of her diet. Nonetheless, he realizes that he has become a dad all of a sudden. Kayouya then decides to confirm what is going on around him. After that, he starts researching. After graduating from Unaka Arts, he has been working at a game company called Attraction Point. He then picks up his phone, thinking to call someone. But he is shocked to see his last contact was a month ago, but he calls regardless of it. Aiko picks up and tells him to come early tomorrow. He realizes that he has been working at the same company as Aiko in this world, too. Upon waking up, Kayouya realizes he is still in 2018. Just then he remembers clapping Iki last night and remembering her huge talents. After that, while reading the newspaper, he peeps at his wife, who notices him, making him scared all of a sudden. Apparently, Kayouya works at Attraction Point, a famous game company, and in 2016, he originally came from that place too. They aren't considered the top of the industry, but they managed to turn out hits at a regular enough pace, a mid-tier developer. After reaching his workplace, he wonders what exactly the development manager of Entertainment Group Section 3 even does. After entering the place, Kayouya finds everyone sleeping on their desks. Kayouya then finds his place, where a picture of his family is placed. Suddenly, Morishita calls him out, saying the producer wants to see him. He then sees her ID card and realizes she must be who Aiko mentioned. Morishita asks him to come to Tahiti right now with her. As he enters Tahiti, he keeps on staring at Aiko, making her anxious about Kaiouya staring in such a creepy manner. Later on his way, Morishita apologizes to him, telling him this is really what their team should be dealing with. After that, she tells him the producer is right about him. After that, they go to Ayaka's house. As they are heading to the elevator, Morishita tells him that every time she tries to get ahead of Ayaka, she pretends she isn't home, realizing that it must have been one of those tricks. After entering her house, Kaiouya realizes her real name is Seikawa Ayaka and she is a popular illustrator who has got over 200,000 followers. Furthermore, he notices that her game's profile is nice and high. Kaiouya then tells her that the designs are scheduled to be finished by February. He then asks her if she has ever needed this much extra time before. This makes her realize that there is really no fooling him. Eventually, Ayaka confesses that there is just nothing she wants to draw anymore. This shocks Kaiouya and Morishita as she tells them that it feels like there's nothing to get excited about. This makes Kaiouya stand up and go to her desk to see her art. He is amazed to see how wonderful a piece of art she draws but feels like it is different from her usual art. Ayaka busts in joy and feels great after hearing his compliment. Out of joy, she tells him that she is drawing it from scratch and is getting back to her roots. Kaiouya wonders what she means by going back to her roots. She replies that there was an artist she used to idolize, and this was their style. Following that, Kaiouya asks Morishita about the schedule she mentioned, making Kaiouya realize that it is different from the future he wanted and there is something for him to do in this world, too. However, he thinks that he could still work with talented creators like her. Later that night, Kaiouya is having dinner with his family, and he thinks about how this is most people's idea about happiness, a cute wife, and a daughter. Kaiouya tells his wife that he got to meet Ayaka today, but surprisingly, she is unaware of her. The next morning, the producer tells Kaiouya that he needs to convince her to get back to work. The producer is angry at them since he wants him to try and take care of Ayaka. Later, Kaiouya and Aiko are having their lunch, while discussing the position of a producer and how harshly he acts. Kaiouya then realizes how Aiko was always so awkward in the past. He also reflects on how, in the 11 years he missed, Aki abandoned her dream of becoming a Kashima and chose to become his wife instead. Just then, Aiko gets up and mentions how she wants to go to a meeting. In the workspace, Kaiouya wonders if this world is an extension of what happened back then and then watches Nanako's video regarding the announcement. There, she tells her viewers that this is her last stream and Kaiouya can't believe it. He then searches for Tsuruyuki but can't find anything about him as well. Kaiouya blames himself and regrets what he did back then. Later that night, he falls into junk, realizing he wanted to remake his life and he tried getting close to his friends but ended up stealing their dreams. When he gets back home, his family is shocked after seeing his condition. Aki mentions to him that she had left drawing, and it must have been troubling him all this time, later giving him a hug in order to console him. The next day, Kaiouya is having a meal with his family, and he realizes that because of him, Aki lost her passion to draw and lost the future where she became a Kashima Shino. In the office, he starts working and one by one, his fellow employees keep asking for his help. He thinks about how it's been a month since he was sent into 2018, and he is finally starting to get used to his job. Apparently, they are split into 4 teams and each of them is working on different projects in parallel. Aiko is in charge of the A team, which is the team everyone thinks of regarding this group, and she is also the chief of entertainment group 3. As he gets back home, he realizes how wonderful his life is at home. The next day, at his company, Kaiouya realizes that Tima has been working overnight again. One of the employees tells him that there is a problem with Ayaka. He then goes over to him and tells him in a silent voice that there are other illustrators they haven't been able to contact. So, they had to cut characters, which resulted in changes to the script. Morishita gives him signals, and they go out. On their way, he asks her if Ayaka has problems, and Morishita tells him that she got an email from her, saying that she doubts she'll manage to meet the deadline, no matter how much she works. However, they then go to her place, and Kaiouya tells Morishita that he even arranged an appointment beforehand. Right after, he moves forward to call her, and the gates open. After she opens her door, they get shocked to see Ayaka dressed up as a wannabe goth girl. She tells them she rarely dresses outside, and Kaiouya tells her this suited her very well. Ayaka then tells them she couldn't draw the thing she wanted to draw, and Kaiouya asks her about the art from that day. He further tells her that she created that art seriously, but Ayaka replies that she was drawing a style similar to an artist she idolized. After being disappointed, Kaiouya and Morishita head back, and she tells him that the longer someone works in this field, they are bound to get into a rut where they are unable to completely draw anything. She further says that for now, she thinks even being able to meet her today was a big accomplishment. Kaiouya realizes the expression he saw on Ayaka's face last time. He thinks there must be something to that. The next morning, The producer is shouting at Aiko, telling her that the characters designed by Ayaka are the headliners this time and that it's already been announced to the public. Kayouya says, in the end, that it was decided that Ayaka's illustrations wouldn't be ready in time for release. Later, Kayouya and Aiko are having lunch when she asks him if he wants to talk about her team's project. Kayouya shamelessly agrees, telling her that he is looking at the sheet and things didn't seem to be going very well. Aiko then tells him that she was tempted to fly the coupe to Okinawa. Kayouya asks her if Mystic Clockwork was originally a successful soft title, making her surprised as he didn't know. Kayouya tells her that it came from a major player like Succeed, and he bet all production materials were in good shape. After their conversation, Kayouya visits the producer and tells him that if they proceed at this rate, their game will have bugs, which could lead to defects nobody's imagined. The producer then shouts at him, saying this period is going to be crucial for the company's trust going forward, as they are going public. They are going to release a big title developed on an internal engine. Kayouya then tells him that the engine isn't trustworthy, and it might not even be practical. But the producer tells him that Mystic Clockwork will be released on schedule. After getting back to his desk, he thinks about when he showed up in their lives 10 years ago and changed the world. And his friends, who were supposed to have become stars, lost their dreams because of him. The month after that, Mystic Clockwork launches on schedule. While walking back home, Kayouya hears all the people talking about bugs they found inside the game. While he is spending time with his family, Morishita calls him and he runs to meet up with her. Morishita tells him that it seems like gacha rates are varying from account to account. She asks him if he is familiar with the voice actor, Tsunemori Yuta. Turns out, it all happened when the voice actor who portrayed the main character manages to draw SSR characters. As they walk past the producer's office, Aiko seems to be getting scolded by the producer. Seeing her, Kayouya remembers his friend, Tsurayuki. Morishita gets insanely angry at their boss, but Kayouya tells her that there was nothing he could do and went to his desk, where he thought he decided to not make the same mistake again. He then sees a video link sent to his email. After opening, he sees Nanako's video, in which she says she didn't want to be the one who invalidated everything Kayouya did, and that is why she is going to sing. As she starts singing, Kayouya wonders if what he did could ever be forgiven, and in this world made by his failings, he found small salvation. After getting tired of hearing his boss bark, Kayouya slams his desk and comments on how he will figure something out. Kayouya decides to do whatever it takes to solve the problem and tells his boss about it. Furthermore, Kayouya requests to handle the response and asks to swap engines for Maizclo right away. The boss doesn't approve and wants to fix the current engine. However, Kayouya informs him that the bugs are way too far gone for them to fix, and Aiko agrees with him. Still, the boss is worried about how there is no time, but just then, an employee arrives and adds the new engine to the game files, resulting in the game working without crashing from a bug. Kayouya informs everyone that the Anity engine is the new engine that he is using, but the boss is still worried as it costs a lot. Kayouya agrees and informs him that he used Team B's budget. Aiko realizes that he picked an engine that would be compatible with both Team B and Team A games. Kayouya then shows the boss a document that proves that they still have some funds left after the extra costs. With that being said, Kayouya along with Aiko's help starts the preparation and asks Morishita to handle the social media accounts, as she has the broadest outlook of everyone in the office. He reassures Morishita that she can do a great job, and she agrees. He then asks her to contact the voice actor's agency and apologize on the phone. Furthermore, he wants to let them know that he will be handing over the casting decisions. Upon seeing the ugly boss ranting, Kayouya replies that it is better to hand it over than face a defamation suit. After that, Kayouya asked the person in charge of scripting to take a comprehensive check of the system and give him more than enough time to take care of it. Following that, Kayouya asks about the apology gems they hand out and wants to give away 10 times the usual number. This results in the boss yapping once again, but Kayouya argues that they need a big enough impact for the people to get talking. Furthermore, Kayouya gives everyone a 2-day break, which makes the boss explode as he starts yelling at Kayouya, but surprisingly, Kayouya yells back, scaring the boss. He then begins to remind the boss how they are supposed to trust each other and the company they work in. Additionally, he mentions how every member must have regrets about previous failures. According to Kayouya, the best way to recover from this is to make sure that their future plans are as clear as possible. Currently, their game made a pretty bad impression and they need to go above and beyond for people to come back to it. Afterward, Kayouya mentions a story about an app that had a critical bug. People tried to cover it up, but one person went public with it and was as honest as possible. Apparently, that person was the boss right in front of Kayouya, and he mentioned that being honest wasn't a bad decision at all. Kayouya then asks him to take a look around and think a little about the people working and the things happening. This results in the boss giving them an open hand to deal with the problems. With everything cleared up, everyone starts working again, and Kayouya advises Aiko to go home and rest a little. Later, Kyoya goes to the boss's room and he asks Kyoya if he was aware that the boss was going to explode. But Kyoya replies that he had no idea about his reaction and only told the solution that he could come up with. Additionally, he makes a guarantee in exchange for his boss's understanding, and that guarantee turns out to be Ayaka agreeing to turn in her illustrations. However, she is hesitant until Kyoya shows her the art of the game they once made, making her surprised as to how Kyoya knew that she liked it. This makes Ayaka mention how she was about to leave art school once, making Kyoya relieved that she didn't, or the politics of the world would have been different. Nonetheless, she started hating art until one of her seniors got her into Haru Sora, where she realized that art has the capability to move somebody. Ayaka then had a dream to make art with that person, but Kyoya replies that it's not possible anymore because of his fault. Eventually, seeing this picture motivated Ayaka and she asked for a week to complete the illustrations. The next day, Morishita arrives and informs Kyoya about how Ayaka agreed to draw another character and tells how Aiko also came up with a super thick manual to help with the development. Just then, Kyoya found out that Aiko had a flight leaving pretty soon. This resulted in Kyoya making his way to the airport and worried about how he made the same mistake again and bulldozed over Aiko when she was in charge. Kyoya regrets not learning anything after what happened to Tsurayuki and arrives at the airport. Coincidentally, he runs into Aiko, who reassures him that she isn't quitting. She then asked the reason Kyoya was worried about her, and Kyoya replied that he was scared that she might leave the same way everyone did. He further mentions that while trying to help others, he only helped himself. Aiko asks if he feels guilty for what happened and Kyoya agrees, making Aiko put her hand on his hand. She lifts up her bag and slams it in his ugly, miserable face. She then tells Kyoya that he was an honor student and good enough to make her jealous. Aiko then questions why he never asks for help or tries leaning on others when he finds himself in trouble. She further mentions how Kyoya tried chasing after Tsurayuki after he left but couldn't do anything when Iki stopped drawing. He wasn't even able to help Nanako when she was frustrated. According to her, it was not his responsibility and he shouldn't feel guilty about it. Aiko then tells Kyoya that he always worked hard and put his personal feelings aside to help others. In the end, she reassures that Kyoya hasn't done anything wrong and asks him to have a little confidence in himself. Aiko then starts complimenting him and accidentally reveals that she loved him, making the bystanders laugh, but her cold side eye is enough to take care of it. The two of them then sit together and Aiko mentions that even if she knew that he was suffering in the university days, she would have tried her best to help him. But considering Kyoya's personality, he wouldn't have asked for help. After Aiko's flight leaves, Kyoya wishes to go back in time when suddenly, Keiko appears, surprising Kyoya. After meeting up with Keiko, he thinks about how he wants to head back. This makes her question Kyoya's decision, considering he has a child, a wife, and a stable job that most people want to live a happy and comfortable life. Kyoya replies that he doesn't want to go back and act as a hero but to struggle and be pushed to the edge. However, he wants to go through the trouble with all the friends he made and would take that over a happy future any day. Kyoya then begins to tear up and mentions how he wants to go back and be together with everyone. Keiko then gives him a handkerchief and is about to send him back, but Kyoya stops her. He mentions how he met a lot of new people in this life and has someone he needs to say goodbye to. With that being said, Kyoya gets home and is greeted by his daughter, who informs him that Iki is really good at drawing and shows him one of her art. Soon after, Iki comes to welcome him and Kyoya asks her about the art. Iki replies that she played the game Kyoya told her about and seeing the illustrations made her want to draw again. This reminded him of what Aiko said earlier, and he gave her a hug with tears in his eyes. The moment they are about to sleep, Iki mentions how she got the itch to draw and everything happened naturally after that. Kyoya apologizes to her, but Iki replies that there is no need for him to apologize as she has him and Maki, which made her realize that everything would be okay. However, the moment she started drawing, a lot of stuff she had forgotten came back to her and it felt really fun. Iki then mentions how she wants to draw again and will be focusing on art from now on. This makes Kyoya promise to support her in any way possible, which brings tears in her eyes. Iki then tells Kyoya that she wants to draw something big. It can be anything from nature to city and talks about how she is unaware of the type of drawing trending these days. The next morning, Kyoya is heading out for work and gives the two of them one last hug before going to buy some milk. Outside, he meets up with Keiko, and the two of them visit a park where Keiko tells him about how he has been cheating because he was aware of the future. However, even with all that knowledge, Kyoya never played dirty or hurt other people. He has always used his own strengths and cared about people before acting, which is the reason he was able to gain people's trust. This is one of the reasons Aiko and Aki were so grateful to him, and the same probably goes for Nanako and Tsurayuki. She then tells Kyoya that he isn't some sort of hero and is still an interloper who can change the future. Furthermore, she mentions how Kyoya must have understood that what he did in his past loop doesn't work. Kyoya agrees and tells her that he wanted to act as their savior, but it was all his ego, which is why he is done trying to act high and mighty. From now on, he promises to trust others and believe in himself as well. This makes Keiko laugh, making her send him back, and he wakes up with Nanako in front of him, worrying about how he suddenly collapsed. The two of them talk to him about how Tsurayuki is dropping out of school, and he steps out of the house for a second. Kyoya then thinks about how he isn't some sort of hero and will only chase the things he believes in. The reason he went back to the past was to make use of the passion that he might never have later in life. A few days later, Hikawa appears in front of Kyoya and tells him about some games that might cheer him up. Later in the club, Sugimoto sings while Masaru enjoys dancing and Kyoya sits quietly and spectates. Kuryu tells Kyoya that he suddenly seems a bit older, and Hiyama agrees, but also starts flaming Kuryu about how he has been looking rough lately. Later that day, he goes to talk to Kano about Tsurayuki's situation, and she mentions how it is a shame even when his tuition problem is solved. However, Kyoya decides that he won't give up on him. Later in class, Nanako tells Kyoya a circle that is making a doujin game asked her to work with them, but she finds it kind of scary to work with strangers. Kyoya suggests jumping in and giving it a try, but she tries bringing him along. Nonetheless, Kyoya asks Nanako to do it on her own, which makes her mad, and she starts hitting him. He thinks about how he is trying to make Nanako independent so she can become the Nana she has to become. Apparently, Aki also doesn't feel like drawing anymore, and Kyoya wonders what the reason could be behind her sudden demotivation. The next day, Kyoya is walking to university when a girl bumps into him, and he notices a sketch she drew along with a copy of the game he made. This makes him realize that she is the Ayaka he knew from the future, but she runs away after apologizing. This small incident makes him realize how Aiko was right and that everything has a purpose. This was all about our producer. Do you think Kyoya will be able to contact Tsurayuki ever again? Comment artists below and let us know if you enjoyed it. Make sure to like and subscribe. See you guys in the next video.